Welcome back, listeners, to the BizBlend podcast. I'm your host, Sana, and this is the space where strategy meets soul, bold conversations spark real transformation. Now, today we are exploring a topic that's not just timely, it is essential for every leader navigating the future of work, the power of innovators' mindset. And joining us is the brilliant JL Heather. He's the founder of Centered, which is a cutting edge innovation consultancy. Let me share a bit about JL. So, JL is a sought after innovation coach and strategic advisor who helps organizations transform visionary ideas into executable action. His work blends design thinking, agile leadership, and also real world insight to help teams embed innovation into their DNA. And in this conversation on BizBlend, we'll be unpacking what it really means to think like an innovator, how that mindset shifts team dynamics, and why leading without authority might be your most powerful move yet. So, if you are a founder, a team leader, or someone who feels the pressure to keep up, you'll want to stay with us until the very end. So, let's quickly dive in. So, JL, welcome to the show, and I'm really, really excited for our conversation today.
Sana, thank you so much. I'm excited as well. Innovation and leadership are two of my favorite topics, so I'm ready and willing.
Absolutely, absolutely, JL. Okay, so you emphasize on innovation not just as a process, but as a mindset. Um, how exactly does it look like? I mean, what defines an innovator's mindset in practical, everyday terms?
That's a great question. I think the way we kind of approach it is maybe almost from a neurological perspective, where your brain has a few different systems that are at play. One is the executive attention network or the executive control network, which we tend to
Mhm.
call your executive. So think, uh, oh, what's the movie where the emotions are in your head? Uh, I can't remember, but think about it like as a voice in your head. The executive is there, and the executive control network is this idea, this voice that's always trying to make sure what you do makes sense. It's trying to say, here's what you're paying attention to, and here's the best way to deal with it. So it's kind of like a governor in a lot of ways. The other one is we call the dreamer, which is more what you would call your default mode network. And your dreamer is kind of that joy in your head. Inside Out,
Mhm.
that's the movie. It's joy, that voice of joy. It's that voice of creativity that you're born with and that children kinda grow up with that has all these amazing ideas. It's where your imaginary friends come from. It's where some of your most crazy and best ideas come from, and that's your
Mhm.
dreamer. And then the third is your guardian. So it's that part of your brain, that maybe more deep part of your brain that governs the fight, flight, or freeze moments, the stress. He's there to keep you safe. So when we talk about the innovator's mindset, what we're really kind of talking about is how do we manage those three personas in your head and keep them in balance so your dreamer has a voice, the ideas from your dreamer are being filtered through your executive effectively, and the guardian is keeping you safe, but not overriding the other two. Because when you're in a really stressful situation, the first thing your guardian does is push the executive and the dreamer to the back and takes over. That's why you have those outbursts or those frozen moments where you don't know how to respond. But yeah, when we talk about the innovator's mindset, it really is how do you manage the executive, the dreamer, and the guardian to ensure you're getting the highest quality ideas and reactions to the real world around you.
Wow, executive, guardian, and dreamer. Wow. That's quite a fresh, very very different analysis of this, Jay. So that's really a good one. Um, and we often associate or we picture leadership with authority, but you emphasize influence over authority. So, in environments with rigid hierarchies or corporate setups, how can leaders model this kind of leadership without losing control or structure?
Right. Well, so and maybe before I answer that question, it might be important to talk about why this is so important. This innovator's mindset and leading without authority. Because when we look at the industry as a whole, an industry of innovation or transformation, what we see is 75% of transformations fail. And then depending on the research you look for or look at, 75 to 95% of innovations fail. And when you kind of dig into the why, one of the things you quickly see is 80% of organizations approach activities like transformation or innovation with the same operating model, with the same approach that they use for everything else. So it kind of goes into that definition of insanity. If you are doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results, you might be a little bit on the insane side. And that's kind of what we do in our organizations. So when we start talking about this innovator's mindset and this leading without authority, part of what we're trying to do is break people out of the pattern that they're in, because what got them there isn't going to
Mm,
get them to the next step. So part of that innovator's mindset is changing the way that leader shows up and helping that leader not only balance their executive dreamer and guardian, but helping bring out some of those same qualities in their people around them. Because what we know is when companies actually embrace innovation,
mm,
they see really good results. So on average, innovative companies are more than 3.5 times likely to outperform their peers.
yeah.
The other thing we know is they're gonna attract the best talent, which is a big part of what you need to succeed. So 78% of millennials, for example, are considering innovation is a key factor when they look at employers. So when we're looking at all this, part of it is how do the leaders show up in a way that's going to deliver the best results for their organization and help them attract the best people and keep the best people. Now, to kind of answer your question around leadership versus authority, that kind of starts getting into how we keep our best people. Because when you exercise authority, you are disempowering the people you work with, which is in direct opposition to supporting innovation. When you want an innovative team, when you want a team that wants to have a high level of problem solving ability, you
Mhm.
need creativity at the forefront. You need them to be empowered. You need them to be informed. And the best way you can do that is to empower them, to support them. So there's an experiment that anyone who is a psychology major will know. Stanley Milgram did this way back, where he basically put two people in the experiment. One of them was a plant, and one of them was the person that was being observed. They would go into a room, they'd draw straws. One of them would be the learner and the other would be the teacher. The learner would be put in another room. The teacher would be sat down in front of a board with a whole bunch of voltage meters on it, and they couldn't see the learner, and they would just start asking the learner questions. And every time the learner got it wrong, they would shock them. And just to be clear, that person was a plant. They weren't actually getting shocked, but the person who was the teacher thought they were. And as the shocks got more and more, the teacher got more and more nervous, and they'd look at the person running the experiment, and the person running the experiment would just say, "Please continue." They'd shock them more, and, like, they'd be like, "Oh my god, I'm hurting this person," and they'd look at this person like, "Do I really need to continue?" And the guy would just say, "Please continue." And they would keep on going. It's not the most ethical study in the history of the world, but it is really informative about what happens to humans when authority is the main source of direction. We give up all our agentic mindsets, all our decision making ability, all our creative ability goes away, and we abdicate to whatever that authoritative leader says, right? Which is exactly the opposite of what you want. So that's why we try and work with leaders to start leaning in to that influence, that motivation to help people kind of see what their potential is. What we like to say is we take them from being the chess master leader to being the
Yeah.
gardener leader. They shouldn't be the person controlling every move and responsible for the outcome of the game. They should be the person responsible for the garden, the environment. They should make sure that the weeds have been pulled, the blockers are handled. They should make sure there's enough sunlight. They should make sure there's enough water. They should make sure the right plants are being planted together. There's a whole metaphor that can go around this that kind of fits into this gardener leadership, or a better word for it that comes from the world of Agile is servant leadership. And I think that's the heart of what we want to talk about when we talk about the difference between authoritative versus influence-based leadership.
It's a brilliant way of explaining this, JL. Brilliant way. And I absolutely agree. I mean, it's more towards the nurturing leadership, not the authoritative, the micromanaging leadership. That really challenges the traditional ideas on leadership. Um, and Before even we talk about the way forward, do you see any or if you do see, what kind of roadblocks, most common roadblocks, you see that stop innovation before it even starts? I mean, does it start from the leadership itself, or is there something else that plays an important role here?
There are a lot. I mean, you can look at leadership as a common one. If the environment isn't right, if the teams don't feel empowered, innovation won't happen. But I think that's a fairly commonly known thing, especially when people talk about innovation. I think one of the biggest things that maybe flies under the radar for a lot of people is you will set up the environment, you'll get an empowered team together, but the way you talk about your goals
Hmm.
makes the solution the center, right? So you walk into it saying, "We have this great tool, let's be innovative in how we use it." That's solution focused, and what you end up with is you have this tool, let's call it a hammer, and if you go into this innovative moment with this hammer, all of a sudden, everything you look at starts to look like a nail. So you've biased yourself from the very beginning. So I think maybe the thing leaders really need to pay attention to is what is the human-centered problem that you're trying to solve. Put all the solutions, everything you have in your head about what could possibly work aside and really get clear, what is this job to be done? To quote Tony Olick, what is this human need that isn't being met or could be met better? And what is the problem space around that? And understand that first and start exploring that with a beginner's mindset and then let the solution come. And it may be something completely different than what you have. It may be something that's in addition to what you're already doing, but I guarantee the outcome is something your customers will care about. And that is the risk that every organization is trying to fight when they innovate. So if you start with the solution, chances are you're going to get more of what your customers already don't like. If you start with the human need in mind and work towards a solution independent of anything else you've done with that beginner's mindset, you're going to solve a real human need that is going to be far more viable in the market and far more likely to succeed with your customers.
Hmm. Hmm. It's more of an inclusive approach. More
Right.
inclusive approach, yeah.
Yeah. And if you can bring your customers into that process, like 1 or 2, bring them into the innovation process. 1, it's a great way to form a customer relationship, and 2, the insights are just gonna get extra benefit from their presence and their insights.
Absolutely. That's a good one. That's a good one, Jill. And also, do you, can you help us with any examples of this? You know, let's uh, take a case study or a success story. You know, where shifting to an innovator's mindset it dramatically changed a team's performance or culture.
Yeah. So one of the things we do at Centered a lot are design sprints. And this is not a new term. This isn't our term. This comes from Google Ventures, who's usually credited for this. But it's a really powerful 5-day experience. And while the workshop happens in 5 days, there's a lot of setup that goes into it. But the idea is over the course of 5 days, we take this human problem that's been identified, we explore the problem space, we do some idea generation, we build a rough prototype, and we test it with customers at the end. So in 5 days. And we did this with a company, HP, out in Houston. And in 5 days, we had a prototype that was something that got their executives excited. We had people telling us it was the most productive workshop they've ever been in. And they did something in 5 days that takes most organizations 6 to 12 months to get a customer tested prototype. And that's something that they're running with and they're working on. So that type of momentum, that type of speed is something most companies, especially larger companies, feel like is impossible. But when you really get the right people involved, when you have the right mindsets ahead of the workshop and you can run with it, like the speed is almost unbelievable and the results are pretty close to that as well.
Right, right. Wow. Sometimes the I think people relate deeply to stories, and they show us what's possible, especially when theory feels too far off. And the brilliant thing is, not only you are bringing the internal stakeholders here, but you're also bringing the external stakeholders. You're bringing customers here as well.
Right.
So that definitely speeds up the innovation. And then for organizations and JL who are wanting to bake innovation into their long term culture, not just one time investment or one thing or workshops. What systems or habits or frameworks do you recommend they should put in place?
So, one thing to think about, those workshops, while they are one-off events, they are part of a culture too. A lot of times the way we frame a design sprint is it's a demo of what the innovative mindset looks like and feels like, and it's something that everyone should take back to their teams, and it should help start a little bit of a grassroots movement. The design sprints also involve like a 4-week plus upfront planning phase where we do some coaching. And then a lot of times what we try and do is the team that executes, we coach them as well to help instill some of that innovator's mindset and some of those principles that we need in that team as they go. In terms of what leaders can do and how Centered can help, I highly recommend leaders get some form of coaching. I think it's really hard to examine your own values and mindsets without some external questions and someone who kind of can help bring in some more valuable perspectives. Uh, Part of what makes us successful with organizations is we work with that leadership throughout the process. And what we try and do is help turn things into programs and make things a little bit more generally accepted. A lot of times, the things we do in design sprints are also are tools that you can take into other workshops and other situations on teams. I think more than anything, if I was gonna pick one thing that leaders could do to help their organizations be more innovative, is to stop looking for perfection. Uh, a lot of times what we'll say with a prototype is a cardboard cutout prototype is one of the best because it's so easy to get feedback on that's useful. The more perfected a prototype looks, the harder it is to get realistic feedback because as humans, we don't want to hurt someone's feelings. Oh my God, a lot of work went into this. I don't want to say this bad thing that I'm thinking. So, how can I say it in a way that's going to feel good or not hurt their feelings? Whereas when it's a cardboard cutout prototype, there's no pressure there. They know this is a simple thing. They know that it's just to get their feedback. So you get a lot more real feedback. There's a great book that was recommended to me by a colleague at HP called The Mom Test that I recommend everyone reads. It's a great way to look at how you get customer feedback and input on the things that you're working on. But yeah, so avoid perfection, avoid it in your prototypes, avoid it in your slides, avoid it across the board because the important thing in innovation is movement and momentum, not perfection. The companies that look for perfection lose every time to the companies that look for momentum.
That's a that's a great point. And can you also repeat the book for our listeners so that I can also add them in the show notes for our listeners?
Yeah, it's called the mom test. And it's just a great perspective on how do you actually talk to your customers to get feedback and what kind of questions should you ask.
Hmm. Wow. Great. Thank you. Thanks for that, Jia. Oh, great. And just before we wrap up, I would like to bring in a bit of a different perspective into this. Uh, so, of course, innovation is universally good. We should always push for reinvention. But is it possible, JL, that too much focus on innovation can create instability or fatigue within teams?
I'm sure it's possible. But I think most organizations are so far away from that point that to get there isn't very likely. I think what you have to do is make sure you don't look at innovation as a huge event every time. Innovation is more about how do we come up with creative, effective, efficient solutions to problems. And that can be in your product, it can be in your service, it can be in your operations, it could be in HR, it could be in the way your meetings are run, it could be in the way your board interacts with your executive team across the board. So when we talk about instilling innovation into the DNA of an organization, that's not to say we totally discard bureaucracy, structure, and things like that, because at a certain point, those are required for an organization to function. But what we do say is within those confines, how do we make sure we are coming up with the most creative, most effective, and most efficient solutions to the problems we face as an organization? So I think it is a mistake for organizations to look at innovation as only a product exercise or a sales exercise. It has to be part of every problem you solve as an organization.
That's a good one. Great, great, Jia. So to start with, if our listeners would like to connect with you and get a hold of the resources you're providing, and get started with how they can bring and blend innovation, what will be the best way?
Yeah. I would recommend the first place to go would be our website. So centered.work. And then after that, if you can't find what you need there, reach out to me on LinkedIn, JL Heather at LinkedIn. Uh, and I'm easy to find. I was an early adopter on LinkedIn, which maybe dates me a little bit. But I'm an easy one to find. JL Heather on LinkedIn, and that just send me a DM, send me a message, a connection request, and then I'd love to chat.
Wonderful. I'll make sure to have all the links in the show notes. And Jill, this was such an inspiring and grounded conversation. A lot of insights, examples, and resources, and definitely a powerful reminder that innovation isn't just about tech or trends. It's about mindset, influence, and everyday leadership. So, thank you so much.
Thank you. I had a blast.
So, to all the listeners, if you are walking away from this episode with one insight, let it be this, that you don't need permission to innovate. You just need the intention. And to connect with JL and learn more about his work, just check out the show links in our show notes along with this episode on your favorite podcast platform. And also share this episode with your colleague, your friends, and leave us a review and subscribe to BizBlend so you never miss a breakthrough. Until next time, this is your host Sana signing off. Thank you.